This meeting of the June 6, 2022 meeting of the Hopkinton Select Board to order. At this point, we have Jeff Donahue, Thomas Papanama, and Ken Traum. I expect the other board members will be joining us shortly. I'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Jeff, would you want to lead us?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Neil, you want to start us off with points of pride?
Sure. First of all, I'll just publicly welcome Kelly Henley, our new finance director. This was day 5. She started last Tuesday.
And she's still here.
And she's still here. And we have payroll and AP to sign. She also did AP last week. It's a lot to pull together, just sort of learning how we do things, especially payroll, because there's lots of little idiosyncrasies in there. I also want to thank Paula and then Kelly now. Processing all the summer staff takes quite a bit of effort because we hire quite a few. Also, I want to share 2 things. Second. This is, and Cam, I saw was on video. This is a memo from him. Just to report, he's reporting that he's completed his Eagle project with the help of the Boy Scouts. See there, special thanks to the select board and to Jeff and Ron Klamarza, who is due here any moment. And here's some pictures. He removed the old dam. The old bridge and replaced it with the new one in Hawthorne Forest. So thanks to him for that. And so I wanted to share along those same lines. This is the new kiosk with a map at Houston Field. This was done by Robert Rinden as part of his Eagle Scout project. And you can see the map that's there that you see. And there's actually a QR code, which you can, it works because I tried it. You can do it and it brings up the map. So thank you to Cam, who is on, and Robert, who is finishing up, and we'll have a meeting this week. We are really fortunate with all the Eagle Scout projects throughout the town. We have a list of Eagle Scouts over here that they add. See that I think there's 5 missing that they're adding the more recent ones. So I think that's all I have for points of pride.
Does anybody on the board have any points of pride you'd like to mention? I'll just mention that I thought it was great again to have all of the Rotary flags over Hopkinton out. And I just would like to recognize Neil and Michelle Clark, that in their spare time, they're the administrators for the program. And they put a lot of time in, even though they don't live in town. And, I think that's certainly something that to be thankful.
Spare time is kind of funny with those 2.
Yeah, yes, kind of, absolutely. Okay, we'll move on to administrative. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda for June 6, 2022?
So moved. Second.
Okay, any comments, discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the non-public meeting minutes of April 25, 2022?
So moved.
Okay, and I believe those are sealed. Okay, thank you. Any comments, discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Okay, thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the non-public meeting minutes of April 25, 2022? So moved.
Second.
Okay, and I believe those are sealed. Okay, Any discussion?
Do you have those, Jeff?
Yeah, pass them.
Yeah.
I guess you want to look at them first.
Yeah. Actually,
Those are a bunch of weeks back, and then I wasn't at the meeting, and then I realized.
the last
I
one,
didn't-
Steve. So, which, I'm not on
Yeah,
there,
yeah.
so I was gonna abstain. I don't know who else was not on, if we have enough for a vote on that.
Okay.
So,
Actually, I think it was these three that were here.
okay,
Oh, okay, good.
so do I have a motion? We'll repeat it.
You make
Yeah,
the
so
motion. I'll second.
Okay, without any discussion?
No.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye. Abstain.
Okay, thank you. Next is approval of the public meeting minutes of May 23, 2022.
So moved. Second.
Second, any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Next is approval of the non-public meeting minutes of May 23, session 1, which I believe are not sealed.
Second. Or so moved. Second.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Approval of the non-public meeting minutes of May 23, 2022, session 2, which I believe are sealed. That's the motion.
So moved. Second.
Discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And finally, do I have a motion for approval of the non-public meeting minutes of May 23, session 3, which are also sealed?
So moved. Second.
Second, any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Okay, thank you. I don't see Ron here for public appointments.
Could we do the public meeting minutes in May 23rd? I just, yeah.
Yeah.
Flurry of minutes, sorry.
Okay, okay, since Ron's not here yet, why don't we go to,
what's the run thing? The timber cut?
well, why don't we let Ron explain it?
Okay.
I believe it's, it's where it's located. Thomas or Neil, do you want to take the lead on the Class 6 road policy?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so this is hopefully kind of a starting point and a starting point of where we can start talking about having actual policy. I think we all recognize from.
And just for the audience's benefit, the select board has not seen this before either.
Yeah. I think we can all agree that based on our last meeting, we definitely need to have a Class 6 roads policy. So I was trying to do more research into the Class 6 roads that we have, what we may or may not want to do with them, and then a possible kind of pathway forward. So that's what I wanted to just dive into here. Most of this is actually just a discussion and an illustration of what we have and why it's a more complicated issue than you might think. So yeah, if you want to just go to the next. So this is a brief inventory. Well, I mean, it's a complete inventory of all Class 6 roads we have in town. 10.47 miles. It's not an official tally. That's based off of measurements that I can get from a public database. But I'm sure there's a more accurate count. There's a list of each Class 6 road on the left there with their mileages. And then this table is from the master plan, the old master plan. So there is an updated version of this table in the new master plan, but it was pointed out last time at the planning board meeting that the total of the mileages might not be accurate. So I chose this one. But anyway, you look at it, we have about 10.5 miles of Class 6 roads in town of varying lengths. And yeah, that's them. So yeah, if you want to go to the next page. So I think there are some, there's a lot of questions around what exactly do we have the Class 6 roads for, and why are they here, and what's the purpose of them? And from kind of everything in the municipal guidance, and from what I can find, the purpose of the Class 6 roads is really to stop unplanned development. It's for, you have areas of the town that might
be useful at some point, but we want to maintain road access to it. We want to make sure that we have the ability to have roads in the future, but we don't necessarily know what's going to happen to it right now. So therefore, things where we don't want to maintain the road, but we want to be able to still have rights to the road. And we want to stop premature and scattered development. And then also it's worth looking at what the Class 8 trails is, because I think that's an important part of this discussion. And I don't think a lot of people know what the Class 8 trails are. But effectively, the town can vote to change a Class 6 road to a Class A trail or a Class B trail. But for this discussion, I think we should stick with Class A trails. But it's effectively the exact same thing as a Class 5 road, except you can now put restrictions on its use. So instead of having to have it open to vehicles and traffic, you can put restrictions on it similar to how you put restrictions on any other trail. And then you can also maintain the Class 8 trail. So on a Class 6 road, you can't do anything to it. Otherwise, it may turn back into a Class 5 road, and then you have to maintain it. For a Class 8 trail, you can do upkeep and maintenance. So if we wanted to have something be part of a trail system, we then would be able to maintain it as part of a trail system. One thing about the Class 8 trails, though, is that all the abutters still have all the same access rights. So all the abutters still have the ability to drive vehicles and use the Class 8 trail for whatever purpose they may need. For if they wanted to, say, do like a lumber harvest or something, they would have the right to use that Class 8 trail to do that. So that's the Class 6 and the Class 8 trails.
Can we ask questions?
Why don't we wait till after the presentation? I'll give the opportunity.
So I came up with like 3 kind of categories of Class 6 roads that we have in town that's worth talking about. So a lot of people kind of mentioned not wanting to put any development on any Class 6 roads. And I think that these are kind of 2 potentially good examples of roads where we wouldn't want to have any development on a Class 6 road. So the first one is Patch Road, where if you go all the way up Patch Road before it turns right at Hopkinton Farm, Patch Road keeps going straight and then runs into the Concord border. That's a section back there where there's really nothing back there. There's no real reason to have any development back there. And it kind of goes into other trails back there. So it kind of seems like an area where there's not much point in having it as a Class 6 road. Another one is Old Irish Hill Road, which I looked more into it, and this is actually kind of an enigma, but Old Irish Hill Road is off of South Road. If you go up South Road before you get to the highway, Old Irish Hill Road veers off to the right. There's a house there that you can see here, which actually is, its only access is the Class 6 road. So this is an example of someone who is very close to a Class 5 road, who built a house on a Class 6 road. And I would say that this would normally be a pretty good example of somewhere where we wouldn't want to have development, because the end of this road goes into the Audubon Society property. So effectively, this might be a very good candidacy for a trail where you would want to have access to that area, depending on what the Audubon Society want to do with it. However, Old Irish Hill Road is actually kind of an enigma, because on the other side of this, right next to the highway, is a property whose only access is this Class 6 road. So there's nothing on it. It's just a piece of land next to the highway, but it complicates things for sure. So the next one is why areas we would want to have development of Class 6 road. So the first one is New Road, and New Road is interesting because there's some areas where it's basically the Greenway Trail, but then there's some other areas where it has very distinct development purposes. So if you go past, again, up South Road is filled with Class 6 roads. But if you go up South Road, cross the highway, as soon as you cross the highway, on the left, New Road goes down and then continues up. This one is very interesting because I would say out of all the Class 6 roads we have, this is the least developed. There's basically nothing there. It's more or less bush. But this section of area past and along New Road is in the Hopkinton Village District, is zoned for manufactured housing. And due to state law, all zoning districts have to have at least one district where manufactured housing is allowed. For the Hopkinton Village District, this is where it is. So this is somewhere where you can't really get rid of that road, because then all of a sudden the purpose of that zoning district is gone. And if that area ever needed to be developed for that reason, we would definitely want to be able to have this road here. So this is an area where we definitely wouldn't want to not have Class 6. And we wouldn't want to stop necessarily development on it. Another very interesting example is the dump road. I'm still trying to go through old town records to find when this road stopped being a class 6, but according to all the tables right now, that is a class 6 road. But
I think it's a misprint,
we think it's a misprint. I'm trying to find out when.
that it is not, nor was it ever a class.
Yeah,
6 road.
it's something that we definitely need to clarify. But in this scenario, this road used to be a class 6 road, probably before the transfer station was built. But if it wasn't a class 6 road, then we wouldn't have been able to build the transfer station. So there are areas where having development makes sense and serves a purpose. And then the last one, why it gets kind of confusing, I think Folsom Road is a really good example of an area where it gets confusing. This is if you're going to the dump, there's that 4 corner section. You can kind of see where it cuts that triangle. One side of this, if you're on, I think it's Pennacook, right? On the top of the dump. If you're on that side, which is the picture on the right, if you look down Folsom Road, it looks exactly like a very well-traveled class 5 road. It's well maintained, it has signs, it clearly looks like a road. If you're on the other side of it, you can barely see the sign that says subject to gates and bars. It's basically bushes. So it's very hard to tell, which side of this it's on. But what's also interesting is on the middle of that road is another house whose access is only on that class 6. So this is an area where it's like, depending on which side of the road you're looking at, you could say a very different thing about the purpose or the desirability of that road. But for the mill, it can be confusing. So this is kind of a start of a discussion. And this is based on everything that I've been looking at. This is a proposal that I would suggest we start with, which is first we inventory all the class 6 roads and we decide which roads we want to do with level. It's based on all the discussion that we had from the previous class 6 road issue. It's very clear there's a lot of desirability around maintaining the rural nature of the town, maintaining some of these as trails and open areas for walking, having areas where we don't want development. And I don't necessarily think the best way to do that is by having a case-by-case basis on the class 6 roads. So I think what would make sense is to look at each one of these roads and decide what is best for each one of these areas. Is this an area that we want to develop in? Is this an area that we want to get rid of? Or is this an area that we want to maintain as trails? So to do that, I think it's worth looking at each one of these roads and classifying or coming up with a recommendation for either closing the road, converting it to a class 8 trail, keeping it as a class 6 road, or converting it to a class 5 road.
What does closing the road mean?
So for example, like the dump road, if that is actually a road, discontinuing the road, right, giving up the rights to the road. And in the example of the dump road, that might be something that we want to do anyways, just to clarify it, where the town doesn't lose anything, but it very clearly says this isn't a road anymore. So I think we should do that and then have a permissive building policy for class 6 that's very similar to most other municipalities. Most other municipalities have a policy that allows for building within 600 feet of class 5 road. And in addition to that, anywhere that they build, they have to upgrade the class 6 to a class 5 standards and maintain it. So I would suggest that we have a permissive building policy, except that we don't allow building on any of the areas that's been classified, any of the areas that's been recommended to be reclassified. And then any of those areas that we decide that should be reclassified based either going to a class 8 trail or discontinuing, we should aim to have a vote at town meeting to help push that forward. So in terms of next steps, I think that we should, as quickly as possible, adopt a policy, because it's something that I could see happening again. And it's definitely worth having the policy. And then I think it's probably worth getting a larger group together to try to figure out how we should look at these roads. I think the planning board, roads committee, trails committee, and open space commission all have pretty good insight into the different factors that affect each one of these areas. And it'd be worth having someone from each one of those boards be a part of making a suggestion for each one of the roads. And then once we have an idea of what the recommendation from that panel is onto how we should approach those roads, we should then ideally make warrant articles to push that forward. And whether or not that's at the next town meeting or not is up for debate, but this is just kind of a suggestion and we're talking about. So yeah, that's all I got.
Sabrina, do you want to take over?
Sure, yeah, sorry, I was caught in a work meeting in Concord, so thank you for starting the meeting. All right. Thanks for presenting. Sorry, I came in halfway through.
Thank you for putting that
Yeah.
together. That's a lot of work, I can tell, so.
Once you dive into the maps, it gets really interesting. It's like
Yeah.
every single one of these has something weird going on with it. It's very interesting.
I like the idea of a working group to sort of start thinking about this. And I would add to that list, I don't know if you can envision Karen being part of it. Because the planning board was listed, but I think her input will be invaluable.
Yeah.
And I would also say maybe someone from EDC. Just because if we're going to be talking about foreclosing some areas from development, I think
Yeah.
that'd be a useful point of input for the working group. And it feels to me that next town meeting may be a little ambitious because I think that there's a good amount of work it's going to need to happen.
Yeah.
But I really like the idea. So thank you again for doing it.
I second that. Thank you for sure. And I also like the committee concept. I think though, we should try to be aggressive and shoot for next town meeting. Just because it's in people's minds and
Yeah.
waiting 2 years is.
Ideally, that'd be awesome. I think there's going to be a good bit of work. So.
So I didn't read the statute and I'm not a lawyer. I didn't get the impression that this policy was going to help us in that if the similar instance came up to the last application, you apply to the state, as long as police and fire say it's accessible, the building permit has to be issued. I mean, if they meet the other requirements of the building permit. Is that right?
Yes, and I would say that's why I think we should have a permissive building policy on class 6. What I would say is
There is a permissive building policy on Class 6 right now. Get the police chief and fire chief to say, okay.
except that we don't have that written down as a thing that we should follow.
So the state has it.
I know, but so what we end up doing is we get into a situation where we're looking at every single thing case by case and having to argue the merits for or against, as opposed to having a written set of rules to say, this is allowed, this is not allowed.
I also think an important point is that, as we discussed at the last meeting, it appears that designating something as a class 6 road is not the way that we should be looking at conservation. And so I think this forces very important conversations about what does the town actually want to conserve? And can we transform some of the class 6 roads into class A trails? So.
What I heard you say in your presentation is if it was converted to a Class A trail, the abutters had the right to use it, not the public.
Not to build. No, that's not true. Sorry, to
You said For
clarify.
access
To clarify. So
to drive on,
if they wanted to like do logging or have something like that, if they needed to use it for, if they needed to have a vehicle get back there for any reason, they could use it. They wouldn't be able to do anything to the trail. Like if it was maintained as a very narrow trail that didn't have like the ability to have a vehicle on it, they couldn't just go chop down trees to get a vehicle back. Does that make sense?
well, it makes sense, but if only abutters had the ability to drive on the road, what if it's wide enough,
Yes.
then Amazon can't go
Yes,
there. FedEx can't go there.
correct.
It's gonna be a tough sell at time.
Well, the purpose of the Class A trails would be to turn it into more like a trail.
But almost all these places have 1 or 2 houses on them.
Um,
That's
no, so
that's where I see the.
No, there's a decent chunk of them. So like George's Road is a good example. George's Road, there's a section of it that's class 5 that has houses on it. And then there's a long stretch of class 6 that doesn't have anything on it. And it technically connects into Courier Road. There.
Yeah.
And you don't necessarily, like, for each one of these roads, you could say, we want this section of it to be reclassified. We need that other section that has houses on it or something else. And I, like, if there was a house on it, I definitely wouldn't suggest that you change that over to a class A.
And again, even if this was voted at town meeting, this seems like a taking if we could convert existing roads to trails, that seems like a taking for the property owners that abut that section.
Yeah. I think after looking at all these roads, a lot of these are complicated. I think a very good example of an area that it could make sense
It was
is.
easy to fix it.
What?
If it was easy
I know.
to fix it.
A good example is New Road, which there's technically two new roads. But if you're going up again, South Road, but immediately on South Road, it kind of cuts over the Greenway Trail. There's a large portion of that area that is kind of completely cut off from the ability to develop, and there's nothing back there. And it's more or less a portion of the Greenway Trail. So the portion from there all the way to the highway could make sense to include in the trail network. And I don't think there's the people who have land back there, I don't think have any expectations. I mean, I think there's whoever the logging group is that owns a bunch of land along that stretch, owns a bunch of it. And then once you go to the highway, on the other side of the highway, that's a whole new road, keeping it a road. So like there's an ability to split and cut and make recommendations. So yeah.
That explanation also shows why we have as many class 6 roads as we do. Because when 89 was put in, New Road used to be one road.
Yeah.
Irish Hill and Old Irish Hill were connected.
Right.
And things like that. And then when the dam went in, more sort of dead end roads were created.
There's another interesting one. There's the Barn Corner Road. That ends and then technically cuts across the reservoir.
Yeah.
And then joins back up. So like the two stretches there could, there's a lot that can be done.
Well, I agree with Stephen that next town meeting is aggressive. I agree with Ken that we should try it. I mean, I think it's a tall order. I'm happy that you're going to chair the committee. Let us know how it goes.
Will do. There is a question though about having a policy, whether or not we want to wait until after that is done to have a policy. A policy doesn't necessarily need to go hand in hand with a list of recommendations. And so I'm curious if we should, I don't know, if we should have a
An
policy.
interim policy until we finalize a policy.
Can you just say again, like, how would it work if we do a policy, but we haven't had a chance to go to town meeting or make recommendations?
So what I would say would be, we have a policy that says building on a class 6 is allowed within 500 feet with upgrades.
Right.
Unless that section of that class 6 has been recommended to be reclassified and has not been voted on the town.
Okay. But if we haven't even gotten to the point of recommending what
Then
to do with it, then you're just subject to the
So
policy.
it'd be subject to law.
Okay.
And where does the 500 feet come from?
That it seems to be what people land on. If I looked at like 5 or 6 other policies from other towns, and they're all more or less carbon copies of each other, and they all just more or less say 500 feet from a class 5.
Are there any towns that had lower numbers than that?
I don't think so. I think here I put 600 feet. I went higher. Wait, I meant to go the other way.
It says 6.
It does say 6. I meant to go the other way. I thought higher was the other way. I would recommend less than 500 feet.
Yeah.
All right.
So I guess the question is, do we work on a policy while this super committee is doing their thing, or do we wait for them to do that? Seems to be the most pressing sort of decision tree point.
The only thing I really want to avoid is a scenario where a list of reclassifications is being built, and then an issue comes up, a specific issue comes up, and then the recommendation gets built around that specific issue. That's what I really want to avoid.
Yeah.
Which is that's just a race against time.
I guess what I fear is if you're subject to the policy before it's even recommended, I fear that people may come to us real quickly as soon as we do the policy and try to get our approval. Thinking that once the
Right.
sort of process plays out, that road might be reclassified, or I don't know. That's my concern about doing the policy. And maybe the answer to that is having a little more restrictive policy until we kind of churn through some of these roads, because we can always revisit the policy later on.
True.
But yeah, that's one of the sort of things that jumped out as maybe an area of concern.
Yeah.
To think about a little more. True. Are you volunteering, by the way, to chair
I'm
the?
happy to. I love the roads. I'm happy to jump in there,
Especially dirt roads.
especially dirt roads.
Thank you for being willing to do that.
Yeah.
Since I missed the beginning, were you, I can't recall. Okay, so you're saying. Okay. So it seems like we can work on a policy and have this working group happening at the same time.
We can do the same. It's whether or not we want to institute a policy before. Although I guess maybe then I would recommend that we don't institute a policy until we have the policy. Because if we have the policy and then there's a specific issue comes up, then the onus becomes on the recommendation committee to make a recommendation on that thing.
Right.
Whereas if we don't have a policy, then we're in the same boat that we're in now anyways, where we have to kind of decide.
Or we could we could do that, or we could just say, if you're considering building on a class 6 road that we haven't even gotten a chance to make a recommendation on yet, the requirements for you to build on it are going to be way more stringent than if you wait and see what the recommendation is. To try to dissuade people from trying to jump the gun.
Then we may
Thought it
have to
said
have
we
a
couldn't do-
recommendation sooner.
Well,
That's true.
theoretically, we could have a policy that just says no building on class 6.
Doesn't the state statute say that you
Yeah, I'm
can't do
not
that just
sure.
to stop development?
Yeah,
I would worry about that.
yeah. I don't think we can have a blanket, no building on class 6.
Do you know, Thomas, did you look and see if anybody did have a blanket prohibition?
I didn't see anyone that had I didn't dig too deep into all the towns, but
But I don't, most of them, if they have a blanket policy, no building on class 6, allow the upgrading of the road to class 5 and at the owner's expense or something, the ones that I found. So
Okay.
I'm not aware of anyone that just says
Can't do it.
no building.
Well, it seems to me we should work on a policy because I don't share that concern, Stephen, that people will somehow see this as an opportunity to pull a fast one on us.
Yeah.
Because we're in the same position we're in now, which is it's very fact specific. They still fit the parameters. And I think a policy is going to outline process and some of the parameters. I don't think it's going to, at the end of the day, fundamentally shift how we would approach somebody seeking a permit to build.
yeah,
Yeah, that's fair.
there are two immediate issues that I could see arising where we wouldn't necessarily have any problem with. So the first one is there's the petition to lay out South Road at the very top. That wouldn't have anything to do with this policy. It's a completely different issue. And then the other one is on Courier Road, the lot that the town is selling, that has a class 6 that cuts through it. But they have class 5 frontage and you can't subdivide it based on the class 6. So that also couldn't be an issue.
Do you know if the 500-foot limitation, say, has been litigated? Somebody who was 600 feet away or whatever?
Don't, the cases we've seen really give the board full discretion on a lot by lot basis, the Supreme Court decisions.
Which I could understand that too, because the quality of the class 6 roads is really very, there's a huge difference between some of these. Having 500 feet on one is very different than having 500 feet on another.
I think whenever we get to the point of going to town meeting, we should pick some really low hanging fruit to start with. Just so people sort of understand what we're asking them to vote on.
Yeah.
Because it may be easier to do it that way, because I think there's going to be some roads that are going to be a lot trickier than others, like you pointed out. Oh, if you could include some maps. Because some of those roads, I do not know where exactly you're talking about. Like I'm looking right now for New Road and I'm having trouble. At least on the GIS, the town's GIS.
Yeah, it doesn't show it. It shows it going up from kind of where South Road meets into like by the Cracker Barrel. It shows that portion. On the GIS map, when you get across the highway, it doesn't really show it.
Yeah, like physically I know where it is.
Yeah.
But looking at it from a map to see like what's around it, it doesn't show up.
Yeah.
And on the other side, they, not too long ago, did logging, upgraded it, so they'd received permission to do that. So that's largely just for
I'm wondering if for, let's call it a temporary recommendation, if you could, look at all the other towns and come up with one that you think is a reasonable proxy that we could utilize on a temporary basis.
Yeah, definitely. And again, I mean, most of the other towns are almost word for word copies of each other. I think there's actually a template from the municipal organization.
Yeah.
So
That's what I saw. They all look very similar.
yeah, I can definitely.
Okay, so you're gonna take a crack at drafting?
Yeah, I'm happy to take a crack at drafting and then.
You could say you love roads.
I do love the roads. In terms of actually getting a group together to do this, I mean, I'll just email the chairs of the boards.
Are you happy to take that on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Are you looking?
I think you should make sure you have a from each group clear charge for whatever
Yeah, so I think having one person from
before they begin that the board approves.
I think having one person from each group, and I think having a charge of on each class 6 road that we have, having a recommendation from the group as to whether or not it should be discontinued, converted to a class 8 trail, converted to a class 5 road, or kept as a class 6 road with the understanding that there'd be a permissive building policy on the class 6 road.
Those are gonna be fun meetings. Good luck. I think, Sabrina, before you got here, there was some questions for the public that we put off until we were done.
Okay.
Just so you know.
Thank you.
I was just gonna add that in addition to everyone that was on that committee, probably ought to have police and fire
Yeah,
and DPW.
I thought I put DPW on there.
I don't think they were on there.
Oh, I didn't put DPW because technically they're part of the roads committee.
That's
Oh,
true. That's
okay.
true. That's what made me think of it, actually.
Yeah.
You mentioned the roads committee. But yeah, they should have some input in.
Yeah.
This as well. Great. Committees.
And
get more.
so
I think they may want to have a smaller committee that puts this together and then have people review it, because this is going to be a lot of time to pull staff in
Mhm.
to go through the whole
Well, then
process.
what about having planning trails, open space? And then we get and then that builds a recommendation, and then the recommendation goes out to everybody that we're talking about for comment. That way we don't have to pull everybody in for a bunch of meetings. They can give comments on it and then go from there.
I think you might get more done faster. than-
Yeah.
That's a good.
So if you have planning board, trails and open space.
Yeah.
Then,
Yeah, go ahead.
no, I'm just trying to think logistically. What would we be looking at for like staff time? And then these are all like legit committees that would be subject to posting and 91A. Yeah,
Absolutely.
okay. So we have to make sure they're properly noticed and all of that.
So I would think you could start getting people, but bring a written charge back for the board to approve at the next meeting. Committees that start without a charge. No charge.
Mission
Mhm.
concluded.
Yes.
Mhm. Okay, Okay, so we'll move forward on the policy and we'll move forward on pulling this group together. I am also happy to help with the document itself, because I also look at a lot of towns, and yes, it does seem like there's like a template.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. Anything else on this?
The public had asked if they could have comment. I don't know if you want to do it now.
Okay. Sure, I'm happy to do that. Mary, do you want to come up or?
I don't need to.
I don't know if people, yeah, I don't know if people can hear is the thing.
Oh,
Yeah, we've got I think it's this that picks you up.
this?
Yes,
Okay.
I think.
No, I think it's on the ground.
No, okay, it's on the
Oh, it's
ground.
this little black thing or it's something.
This one of me?
No, we're not using the phone tonight.
I got it backwards, sorry.
Mary Leadbeater, 33 High Pond Road. Well, to begin with, it's specifically addressing what you can call Patch Road.
Yes.
When you say it's just 0.14 miles, is that from Hogblooms to where?
To the Concord line. So
Really? Really? It's only
it's
not even a
really-
quarter of a mile?
Yeah, it's really short. So it's interesting. So right at that corner there where the road cuts off,
Yeah, up at Hog.
at Hobbles, you can see it where it kind of goes straight.
Oh, I know it very well.
Yeah, and then it goes for a little bit and then it cuts left. and
Buzzell
back
Corner
to
Road.
Buzzell Corner Road. But where it runs into the Concord line is basically right where it turns left to
Oh, no, it goes
Buzzell.
much further.
According to the map, it's really short.
Well, it goes past that.
I believe there is more road that continues on into Concord, but the Concord line is very, very close to that corner where Hogwarts Harvest.
Well, I own orchard land and then forest land.
Okay,
That field that's on the corner of Buzzell Corner and Patch / we always called it District 5 Road. I guess it's
Got it.
District 5 where Concord,
okay.
okay? I don't really know.
It is.
Okay, we just always referred to it as District 5 Road.
Got it.
The sign for closed subject to gates and bars is right at the bottom by Hogblooms.
Yes, okay.
That's been gone, I guess. I don't know if that sign's even.
I didn't
there.
see
Okay.
it there.
I love your idea of not doing anything with that, but I will have to say you're wrong that there's nothing going on up there. That lot that's at the corner, the far side of Buzzell Corner and Patch Road has just been sold. There's been a lot of controversy about it.
And that one has road frontage
No,
on Beetle.
no, has
No.
no road frontage for building.
You're talking about if you go past, you're talking about the intersection of the Class 6 Patch and Buzzell Corner?
Yep.
Yes, I agree. Yep.
That piece of property, and that's both Hopkinton and Concord. And there's been a lot of talk about that because it was recently on the market and the unknowledgeable real estate agent told people that all they had to do was bring the road up to good enough quality so that fire and rescue could get up there, they could build a house. That's what they told Sarah Pacino. And then someone wised him up to say, no, that's not the case.
Yeah.
You need frontage. So I assume Mr. Hogbloom, as well as I, got a lot of phone calls looking to buy our property because we're the ones that hold the frontage.
Got it.
The person who ended up buying it is somebody, well, he grew up in town here and he's been away and now he's back. He and his son bought it and they're hoping to be able to do something with it. And I had the impression from Karen that they'll try to do the layout petition, I guess, because they didn't want to take it to town meeting. So there is a lot going up there.
Yeah.
However, I think your idea of closing it down is perfect.
Yeah,
I don't want it built on. It's a beautiful road. Have you walked on that one?
I drove up a majority of
Uh-huh.
the Buzzell Corner.
Oh, from the other end,
The other end.
from
From,
Broad Cove. Yeah.
but no, I haven't gone past that, but it does look really nice. I agree. And
You can drive up, well, not in your little van, but you can drive up from Patch Road up.
Yeah.
It has been upgraded several times. Whenever they do logging up there, they have to be able to get the trucks in and out. There've been 2 big logging operations in just this last year, this winter.
yeah,
And previous to that, the Concord Area Fire Compact has a tower up there.
Yeah.
And they cleared trees back. I don't know whether they had permission from town to do this. They had to get permission from me to cut one of the trees so they could get line of sight to Hennecker. They don't need it anymore because they use cell phones and things. They don't use walkie-talkies or whatever they used to use.
Yeah.
But so there's often, that's one thing when you talk about upgrades to some of these roads, they will be brought up to usable
So.
by loggers.
Right, that road, the patch road that continues on, once you get to the Concord border, that continues on, correct? In
Right.
Concord?
Yep.
Okay,
That's, although that one, Concord, the city of Concord gave the abutters ownership to the middle of the road.
okay.
So
So it's not actually a class 6 over there,
it's probably closed, I guess.
like closed?
Yeah. Although they do get some pressure from people at the other end to want to build, I think. I'm not sure.
So, I mean, that goes, it brings up an interesting point. It goes back to what Stephen was talking about.
As to whether or not this is going to be something that we want to have sooner rather than later, and whether or not we want to have a policy right now. I mean, if it sounds like someone's currently bought a property that would be underneath this entire umbrella, with the understanding they would be able to do this, and we just had a situation that's similar.
Now, I don't know if he still wants to do it. They bought more property than I think they're clearing, so I don't know if they still want to do something. And he talked to Jeff Dearborn about putting a Christmas tree farm in. So I don't know if he'll want to do cut your own, which would mean upgrading the road.
Well, I mean,
So I just wanted you to know there's a lot going on up there.
Working policy around
Mhm.
individual.
no, right, and
Yeah,
like,
right,
in my ideal situation, we wouldn't deal with another one of these issues until we can get this properly settled. And so like, I'm almost wondering, can we have a policy that just says, we're not gonna do this until we, like, can we, in reality, how quickly can we get this committee together to do this? I think we can do it.
Well,
Excuse me.
yeah, it's getting-
I-
I'm not saying it's getting altered, but
No, I know. Well, I think some of them.
And I don't know if he would come on this from conservation or open space or what trails, but I would highly recommend you get Ron Klamarzik, because I bet you he knows every single one of these roads like the back of his hand. Because he's handled all the logging operations pretty much for either the town, other people, except for the,
In the city of Concord.
yeah, well, the city, yeah, because they just did one on Rick's old land in the city of Concord that was just passed there.
That's a really good idea.
Yeah, but I think he knows more about any of this now.
Okay.
He's not here to defend himself, but I think it'd be really good. And I think you probably would want to.
Okay, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Robert Gould Road. That's a real mess if you go past Pat Ayers' old house and down the hill.
That's the one that, yeah,
Yeah, you know, on Gould Hill.
Yeah.
Just past the red house, there's enough frontage for one house or frontage for a building lot and would give access to an otherwise landlocked piece down behind there, owned by Eric Ledbeater.
we're talking. Oh,
Wait,
So you go just past the house,
yeah,
there was enough, just enough, because Hermie gave permission to build. He said there was enough when my sister sold it.
So there's one lot that looks like it has more or less a section, it basically ends on Robert Gould Road. And then the other two lots that are on that class 6 have frontage on Briar Hill Road,
Oh, down on the other side,
down the other side.
Dulcie's parents.
Yeah, so there's
Yeah,
basically,
on the, going in on the right-hand side from Gould Hill Road, it's all Tim Bassett.
yeah,
And then you go on the other side, you get to the Wines, and then Rick owns a small piece, and then it's class 6.
Yep.
The towns always use that to turn around for plows for
Got it.
years. That's why it's sort of, I think, snuck in as having frontage.
yeah. Well, that's the thing about class 6 is if they're maintaining that area,
Mhm.
then it is class 5 at that point.
Oh, so,
If the town is
Technically-
using it for a turnaround and they're maintaining it as a turnaround, then it would be.
oh, and then that's probably why Hermie said it was able to use it as,
it would probably
the building lot. Because once you get past that, then
Then
it
it's.
dives down and it's awful.
Yeah, it's a whole different.
And that's the same in Concord on District 5 Road.
Right.
People drive through on all of those.
On,
Non-Robert.
Oh, yeah.
not all the way down, on Robert.
Oh, yeah, they do. They
You
do.
get all the way down?
Well, if you have the right vehicle, you can. Have you seen those trucks? Tires that high. At least they always did. And now maybe it's rutted up. Actually, they used to come into the orchard and come up, but that's been fenced off, so I don't think they can.
Yeah, I tried to go up Robert Gould Road from the other side,
Yeah.
and I got to a point where it looks like a bridge had collapsed or something, so.
Oh, of that little brook. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe you can't anymore, but
Yeah,
you
Interesting.
never know.
never know.
Yeah. But I think a good chunk of these roads are just gems as far as for trails. And I mean, I haven't been on a lot of them, but
Yeah.
I don't like change, so they've always been this way.
I think it's also a totally valid recommendation to have
Portions of these roads, not necessarily the entire road be reclassified, but a portion of the road be reclassified.
Mhm.
if there's an area that makes sense. I think New Road's a perfect example.
And that's close to a village. I mean, that's the difference too. It's opposed to going way out and developing. I really think the town, maybe even the planning and zoning ought to try to change some of the land that's closer into the town centers to develop more smaller lots, cluster housing, and, more of that sort of thing. So it's not all spread out. Like someone was talking 2 weeks ago about the Barnard land that's been scalped and looks just dreadful. If somebody had put meandering roads in and a whole bunch of small lot houses with water and sewer, that would be much more desirable than what it looks like now. But it is. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Yep.
It's a perfect example of why maps would be great. I was frantically Googling as you were talking. trying to Orient myself.
I've known those two roads all my life. That's longer than you think it is.
Yeah.
I did find one map that highlights them pretty well. It's like a weird thing.
That's the other thing about these maps is that they're not all super accurate.
And the Historical Society has a bunch of old maps that may show you where these roads went.
That's a good idea.
Did anyone else want to comment? Come on up.
Catherine Mitchell, Boundary Road. I have two questions. The policy you're talking about, is that something that the board would decide upon? Not be put to the voters?
Right, we would develop the policy and adopt it. Yeah.
And would there be public hearings about it?
Well, we could decide on the process we want to follow and potentially take input on it. Yeah. We're not required to have it's not an ordinance. We're not required to have a public hearing, but.
Well, I would say, given what happened at the last meeting and the unusual attendance, that it would be prudent to let the public weigh in. There are strong feelings out there. I guess my biggest concern would be that you seem to be moving toward a more permissive building policy, which seems to be contrary to the master plan and what people have expressed. Can I just finish?
Yeah, yes.
What people expressed in the surveys that were taken. So back in 1979, that master plan protected class 6 roads from development in terms of people's feelings. They didn't want to see development on the class 6 roads. And the plan under which we're acting now, which was based on a survey of almost 1,000 people, the number one concern listed in that master plan said protection of class 6 roads. I feel strongly that by protection, they meant let's not continue development out on all of the class 6 roads. And I don't know if you've had a chance to read the latest survey, but I read pretty much every question and every answer, and it's tedious. There's still a really strong feeling about protecting the rural atmosphere and not having a scattered development. And when asked about, do you want more residential development in town? Unfortunately, the question was pretty poorly worded because there were people who responded, well, where are you talking about? And that was my first thought was, that question is too vague. But a lot of people are, again, concerned and don't want the development spreading outward. They'd want to see the development closer to where the development is. So I'm not sure how you reconcile people's wishes as they've expressed since 1979 about protecting our class 6 roads and not having a scattered development to a more permissive policy as opposed to a more stringent policy.
So just to be really clear, I'm not saying that we should I'm not saying that we should go against the master plan and have more building in areas. What I'm saying is that if there are areas that we want to protect, we should utilize the resources we have available to protect them. The master plan very specifically states that in regards to building on class 6 roads, this policy is what we should have. And we don't have this policy, which is why we need to have it. If there are areas that we want to conserve and maintain, we should use the tools like converting the class 8 trails, or discontinuing the roads to be able to continue that rural nature of that area. But from everything that we found by going through this process, a class 6 road is not a very good way of maintaining that area as a non-developed area. And so I'm not trying to suggest that we have a policy that allows more building. I'm trying to suggest that we do what we want to do. Like if there are areas that the planning board and the community wants to maintain, we should maintain those areas. But I don't think that going by a case-by-case basis on a class 6 road is a great way to do it.
Well, no, it seemed rather subjective as to what was scattered development up there. And, you mentioned, I forget which road you mentioned, but you mentioned that one of them would be a good candidate to be converted to a trail because it led to a conservation area that people might visit. Well, the end of Boundary Road does the same because you cross over immediately into Warner, where the Society for the Protection of New Hampshire Forests owns a huge conservation area. So.
Right, and the class 6 road continues. And there's nothing stopping people from going up and enjoying it. So.
Well, I don't think we have to relitigate that. You made the decision. I thought it was ill-considered, but it is what it is. But I would like to see other class 6 roads better protected.
Yeah, and I think one of the points I think that Thomas is making, which I've also tried to make, is that class 6 roads as a thing are limited in terms of using them for conservation. And so I think the idea is to look at other vehicles for conservation. And that's what we're trying to do. So I think conceptually, a lot of us agree. We would like to see a lot of land in town conserved. But I think, as we saw last week or the last meeting, class 6 roads as a thing are not necessarily like the best way to approach conservation. So I think that's what you were trying to say, Thomas?
Yeah, I agree that if the goal is to conserve these things, we should conserve them.
Right.
I want to do that in the best long-term possible way we can.
And that's not as a class 6 road.
It's not a class 6 road.
If there's a dwelling on a class 6 road that you then decided, or the town decided should be turned into a trail, can you convert it to a trail if there's already a house on the road?
I don't think there's anything that would stop the vote from happening at town meeting, but I can't imagine that would pass. I think that would go into one of those taking scenarios that would be litigated and absolutely, yeah.
Well, and if you had an existing house, I would think, I think you would be grandfathered in.
And that would probably, that consideration, I would think, would influence what portion of it you even bring to town meeting. I mean, if there's houses developed on it, maybe you start it after that last house lot, so that you don't get into a situation where you're accused of taking away anybody's property rights as a result. And I would just echo what you said about public input. I mean, I agree that even though we're not obligated to do so, I mean, I'm in favor of having this be a little more robust in terms of getting public input, because I do appreciate that people feel very strongly on both sides of this. And so, I mean, I like the idea of, getting some public input before we make our decision. And we don't have any sort of policy before us right now.
Right.
So, it's hard. We're talking in hypotheticals and theoreticals, and makes it really difficult. So I'm hoping that when there's something in writing before us to consider, this will hopefully clarify some things. It may not make the conversation any easier because people still feel the way they feel. But at least we have something in writing that we can talk about, and we don't have that yet because this is the beginning of the process. And it's going to take a little time.
Okay, and I have one, well, the PowerPoint's not up there, but I have one question, clarification. Where on the slide that said, is it easy to pull it up again? Oh, thank you.
Which slide?
It was the one that said, make it more permissive. That one, yep. So it's to have a permissive building policy. And then number 3 says accept, no building on class 6 that B hasn't been voted on at town meeting.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is a recommendation as a starting point of a discussion. So nothing here is, but what I'm trying to say there is that I don't think it should just be a small group of people gets together and makes a recommendation, and then that's the rule. I think that if the purpose is to change a road into a class A trail, then we should vote on it at town meeting to change into a class A trail. And if the town says, we don't want it as a trail, we want to maintain it as a class 6 road, then it should stay under all the same rules as all the other class 6 roads.
Thomas, I understand the question because I had the same concern. I think you should just be rewording it somewhat because that gives the impression that town meeting can say no building on class 6.
That was the way I read it.
And that's what.
So yeah, so for each one of these roads, I think that if there's a recommendation to reclassify a road, we should vote on it as quickly as possible at town meeting. And so whether or not it stays on that list for reclassification, if it's been voted on at town meeting, then that vote is the thing that it holds.
So I just say, reword it
Yeah.
to get more closer to your understanding.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Perhaps on the group, we should have someone from the Conservation Commission. I
Yes.
mean, there's a lot of overlap in these.
No,
things.
did I not put that on there?
Not open space.
Open space, but not.
Because
trails.
I'm pretty sure some groups in town
No, I
had
definitely
the
meant it.
chance to purchase the lot we talked about at the last meeting and didn't. So,
I definitely agree with the conservation.
yeah, because if there's chunks of land,
It's a subcommittee of conservation. It's not.
Okay.
Standalone.
Not really.
so
What do you mean?
It's its own committee. It's not really a subcommittee of conservation.
trails is a standalone
Right.
committee,
And there's a difference between open space and conservation.
correct?
Yeah, so I would suggest planning, trails, open space, and conservation. And then, I guess, so that'd be 5 people, which I think is a good size to crank through a list. And then we can get DPW, fire, roads, police, to all put in public input, and then go from there.
Just to clarify, just note that the Trails Committee has no money. They get their money from the Conservation Fund, which is under the Conservation Commission. That's how that works. And we always get updates from the Trails Committee and our Conservation Commission. They can't do anything without the Conservation Commission voting, just to clarify.
Okay. Would anyone else like to comment?
Yes.
All right, come on up.
Sorry about this. I realize this is, long. And I'm going to hit you with some stuff in the public forum at the end too.
On a separate issue or on
It's
this? Okay.
completely different.
Okay.
Waste and plastic. I wish that when these presentations are done, that there could be an opportunity to ask clarification questions, because when you go through the whole thing and then the PowerPoint is down, sometimes like, wait a minute, I knew there was something I was confused about, but then it's gone. So just for future process, that's.
Is there a slide you want to look at?
I think I got my notes down, but I was just saying that maybe in the future, just clarification. So I think I heard you say, Thomas, that what's happening on Old South Road with the petition to lay out is a completely separate thing. How is that a completely separate thing that won't be related to any of this?
So all of these issues are regards to people requesting a building permit to be able to build on a property that doesn't have any class 5 frontage. The issue at the top of South Road is not requesting a building permit. What they're requesting is to build the road, to change it from a class 6, change it to a class 5 and build the road. There's no request for a building permit. It would not fall under this policy. It would not fall under the same thing.
That's not fair. He's asking to do that so he can subdivide.
There's no reason to lay out the road.
I agree, but I'm just
It's a
saying
different
that
process.
if we had a policy here, if we reclassified all these roads, that would not be met under any of this. It would be, it's an entirely separate thing. I agree, but he's not asking for building permits. So that's how it's different. I agree. It's a similar in nature in that someone clearly wants to build on a class 6, but it's not the same.
Can I just add to that for a second? So when you do a layout petition, there is a specific legal test that every single applicant has to satisfy to change the road from class 6 to class 5. There's no way to do a policy for all layout petitions because you have to do them very specific to what the request is. And so when we get to doing that application to lay out, there's a lot more structure for us to go through to evaluate whether we agree with them or not. Class 6 roads and just pulling building permits are a lot more amorphous, and there's a lot less structure unless you have a policy. And so they really are two different things, but they're related, and because you're talking about development on roads where there is no development. But they're very different and they're treated differently by state statute. And so, I mean, if you want to come and observe that process when we get to do the layout one, it's a lot more structured and we have to do it on a request by request basis. And for this, we have more freedom.
I understand that. It's just that it sounded, one thing is that my brain works a lot slower than yours. And so when you're, rattling off the stuff, I'm like, I hear, okay, we're going to have a permissive building policy. We're going to have, this Old South Road has nothing to do with all this other stuff. It's just, it gets very confusing. So I'm just trying to clarify.
I think what I was trying to say is, we're talking about whether or not we need to have a policy quickly because there are these other issues. But having a policy quickly would not help us in that scenario. That's what I was trying to say. It is a different issue. And
It wouldn't help you specifically with the layout petition.
that petition's already happened.
Right, I understood, understood. Okay, so in the beginning, you talked in your first slide, I think, about the purpose of class 6 roads. And this is where I think it's important to think about what I brought up at the last discussion about the death by 1,000 cuts. And, you fragment this stuff and says, well, this statute says this, so you have to do this. And then pretty soon you end up with, everything's built except this little square that's conserved over here and this little square that's conserved over here. And, there are the statutory reasons that you can create the class 6 roads, but once they are created, they take on a whole different meaning for the people in the town. Whether there's any statutory recognition of that or not, these class 6 roads are no longer just roads that we don't have to spend money on anymore. As Mary was saying, some of these roads are just gems. I mean, you guys have been on them, some of them. And, it's not just about saving the town money or trying to do some backdoor way of conserving land. These class 6 roads are a resource that people love and value. And I think that needs to be kept in mind here. So, for example, on Cross Road, when that road, there was a big issue before you were on the select board about Cross Road. And, there was, as you were saying, there are things that you can do. And that's another question I have about what you can and can't do on Class 6 and Class A trail. But you can do agriculture and forestry activities off a Class 6 road.
And
But on-
Class A as well.
Yeah, and on Cross Road, there was a forestry, AKA logging operation that happened there after we had the big problem a couple of years ago. And that road, I'll just use the word, was raped. I mean, there is the road, and then there are the stone walls that go on either side of it. And as we all know, it's the property owners that own up to the center line of the road. All the town has is the right of way. So that property owner, when he was logging this side of the road, said, well, I also own everything right up to the center line, came right across and through some wetlands, which were not permitted. Nobody even looked or said a word.
Some of this is not really true, so I'm not sure. this
No,
should
what I'm saying is this is,
I think we're off topic.
I would
We should make sure if we're gonna discuss
this is
things,
not-
we have accurate.
Yeah. Well, Bonnie, can you?
Personal operations.
no, I'm just saying that what can happen in that situation is nobody was trying to conserve this piece of private property, but people did love that road, which was a shady, overhung, forested road. And when the logging activity happened, it came over the stone walls and took down huge, big 150-year-old trees. I was counting the tree rings on some of these stumps. It completely changed that road, and slash and trash was left all over it. You know that. So it's just that these Class 6 roads have a value to people, just as the beautiful Class 6 road. And it's not about, because we, 50 acres on this side are pseudo conserved or not. It's the road itself. And I just wanted to make that point. These are really special things. Okay, we talked about what you meant by permissive building. I did have a question about, at the last meeting, Bob Wells, who seems to have some background on this, said that he was totally convinced that if we went to do Class A trails, they would never pass. I believe he said that. Do people remember that? It never happened at town meeting. People won't go for it. Is there what background do we know? Because we're starting to talk now about going to Class A trails. This is an integral part of where we're going. What should we know about what has happened in the past in this town with discussions of Class A trails? I think we should probably have a really good understanding of that before we start putting all our eggs in the Class A trail basket. And I don't know, I haven't been here long enough, but I have heard this in the Conservation Commission as well, that there's been issues related to that, so.
Yeah, on Bob Wells's comments, I wonder if he was thinking of a blanket change from Class 6, all of them to the Class A.
Yeah, I don't know.
Talking about is, let's say, more palatable.
I just thought it'd be good to have a better insight into that before we.
And I definitely think that if there's a recommendation to change to a Class A, then it's our responsibility to make a good case for that cause. And to explain that. But on the flip side, I think that if the town decides they don't want to have a Class A trail, then it shouldn't be a Class A trail. If that's what the town
It
decides.
just seems like we're trying to do the work of the committee before the committee's been established.
Yeah.
And that's my personal frustration with tonight so far, is that we need to have a committee and let them figure it out. That's not gonna be me.
The only, sorry.
It's okay, go ahead.
The only other thing I wanted to say was I highly recommend that for all of these roads, and definitely for roads you're making a decision on, you guys go out and do a site visit, because you can see the difference between looking at it on a map, on a laptop, and actually going out or talking to somebody who's on property abutting it. I see this on the Conservation Commission all the time. Somebody says, oh, we want to put a culvert in here in this area. Is that okay? And people say, oh yeah, sounds good to me. I don't see anything on the map, but you go out there and it's a whole different ballgame sometimes when you get out on the land. So I would just recommend that there always be a site visit on the land. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Bonnie.
Be fine.
All right, anything else? Anyone else want to comment? We have one person on Zoom. I have a feeling we would have seen a hand by now. All right, so that brings us to new business. Does anyone have any new business?
New business, I was gonna ask about the surveyor for Horseshoe Tavern and the
I
tax.
can do my report,
Okay,
Oh, okay,
which will be
sorry.
in there. That's it.
all right, let's go ahead. Thank you.
Sure. So first of all, I'll say again, I'm really glad that Kelly Henley is on board as our finance director. I've been working with her on the transition. She will be at your next meeting to do the financial updates. The plan will be that each month she'll come and do those, looking at revenues and expenses. And right now we're working to get the department heads all set up into the software so that they can get their own reports and view. And as we prep for budget season, they'll be able to enter all their own budget information, which should save everybody quite a bit of time. We received a draft contract from Milestone for Houston Barn. That's been sent to Primex and it came back with comments today. So we'll be working through those. The Blackford land sale, initial bids are due by 10 a.m. on Wednesday. And we can do a little clarification on what information will be released. But then the top 3 bidders will have until noon on next Monday to submit the best and final offer. So I guess the question is, do you want any information released on Wednesday, the bidder list, or people keep asking questions and someone said, well, if you know what the bidders are, they can talk to each other. I suppose that's always the case.
Jeff, do you have thoughts on this?
I'm inclined to just, because it's a real estate negotiation, keep it, all the information internal to Neil until Wednesday.
And
There's no, I'm sure I know at least 3 people who are gonna bid. I'm considering it myself.
no, you mean until Monday though? You're asking about what to release on Wednesday.
Yeah, so Wednesday, I'll open the bids. And
And I don't think any of us should know either who bid or how much they bid.
okay, so I'll
I
notify
think you
the top
should
3
keep it-
bidders that you are one of the top 3 bidders.
Yeah.
And
You have until noon Monday to give us your best and final offer, and that's it.
then all the bids will be released at the end.
Yes.
After your meeting the following Monday when you make the final.
I guess I would be in favor of releasing who the top 3 are. Because I want us to be as transparent as we can be without undercutting, the price we hope to get.
So I was at a cookout on more of that,
Yeah,
and someone said to me, well, what if the top 3 bidders get together and they bid, they all reduce their bids by $25,000. So we can just turn down all the bids and process over again. But it's an opportunity for collusion among the top 3 bidders. And, that's not in the town's best interest.
no,
I think there's a good argument for the opposite. I mean, it's not, by not releasing anything, it's not that we're not being transparent, because we don't know. So there's nothing to be transparent about, really. Not like we've seen them or would know what they are, right?
I would actually recommend us not releasing any information until the deal is closed.
Yeah, I guess I'm unclear on what would be gained by,
I mean, just being transparent. I mean, I want us to be, I think it's a good goal, assuming there's no confidential information being disclosed, to be as transparent as possible. And I think that knowing who the top three are could have the opposite effect. If you know who someone's in the top three, you're like, gosh, I better do a really good offer because so-and-so's in the top three. I think it could cut the other way. And I like to err on the side of transparency to the extent that the board agrees and that we can. And so that's just the sort of counter argument to what Jeff was saying.
I would tend to agree with Jeff. I'd be concerned that there's a potential for collusion.
It's not that I don't want to be transparent. I just don't want to be transparent yet.
No. I know that. And I didn't mean it to come out that way.
No. I understand what you're saying. Yeah. And I think it's a good argument.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, if this was, you know, a bid to buy the New England Patriots, nobody's information will be released until someone's selected.
It's true. It's a private sale. Though. Yeah.
It's a
But yeah.
different price,
Yeah.
factor of $1 million. But
Or so.
Okay,
so I think we agree that,
all right. Tyler Bridge, the bids has been awarded to E.D. Sweat by the vote last time. They're finalizing their bonds and insurance, also finalizing the schedule with the fabricator. It's likely a late August or beginning of September start. The good thing is there's enough bond proceeds to cover this, which we weren't sure that was going to be the case.
Are they gonna have to shut down the bridge again?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because that saved us. That's why there's enough money in the proceeds to do that. We had no complaints last time. That doesn't mean we won't this time. And I know it's except for Ken. Flagrant.
Yeah.
Transfer station lagoons, we're testing the stockpile of stuff there in July or August, the driest time. The PFAS testing here is being paid for by DS funds. We've also submitted an application for the Clean Water State Revolving Fund grant loan. If it's a loan, not a grant, it will require town meeting approval in March. We've worked with DES and this all fits into the time schedule we're working on because they understand that. I'd like to skip over surveyor, but I'm still working with Dan Mullen trying to get Richard Bartlett Associates to schedule our survey. Tax deeded property. Some of our properties being sold are less than 3 years, less than a year from the previous owners. So we're working to notify all the former owners of anything that's raised beyond the taxes and the 15% goes back to them. They need 90 days notice prior to the sale, and we're working through just to make sure we do this absolutely right. TDS is willing to sell us the rail bed, which connects Houston Field with the piece of property we have on Kearsarge through there. And we're working on the deed. We should get that to them. That will come to you. Hopefully, you'll appropriate the dollar, approve the dollar. Staffing the 2 sworn police officers are working. The 3rd is moving through the process. Probably should have noted during points of pride that at least our newest officer ran with the torch. He was running by here after doing the midnight shift, which was good. And our second to newest officer was helping with that too. So they were doing that. It was good to see, and it's good to see them getting there. We have 2 potential candidates for the 2 DPW positions. We're working through that. So that's really good. I think pretty sure we'll have at least one. The assistant town clerk tax collector position is still vacant. We really haven't done anything there. The state legislative process, the committee of conferences ended, and it looks like we should be getting an additional $330,000 half in road aid and half in bridge aid. My understanding of it is that's how it's going to work. The bridge aid is coming, so we should be able to use the bridge aid on Tyler Bridge, certainly. We also, it was a 1 year, this legislature voted a 1 year, 7.5% pay for police and fire, New Hampshire retirement. It's not every year. It's not close to the 40% we were at, but it's 1 year. So we should be paying about $27,000 less than we budgeted because of that. But that will dramatically help the schools because it's police, fire, and teachers. So they have that. And I think that is it. It's been a busy couple of weeks, and but we'll be able to get even more done now that Kelly's here. I'll be able to get more done.
Thank you, Neil. And do you have any questions?
I didn't, looking at this, there was public forum and other, I can hold off.
Oh, okay.
Whichever you'd like.
Are they questions related to Neil's updates? or-
Sure. I believe the state is going to be providing $5 million of federal money for dams to municipalities. I'm wondering if, that was something we could look into for the Kimball Lake Dam.
Yeah, we've been monitoring, really, there's quite a bit of money. And as it all kind of, as staffs at DS and places kind of pull it all together, we can monitor this, but we can check on dams. Be a damn good thing if we could.
Had to do it.
Not gonna get it. They're building the new building down there in 89.
Yes.
Sure. It's quite the place.
And you had mentioned a few meetings ago about the lease on the hydro dam in Kentucky.
Yes,
If you could just share the information on the contract or whatever it is we have with them. It's long term.
yeah, it's a pilot. There's some question of where the ownership is, so we are doing research now, so we'll come in. But I'm not sure what you're asking.
I'm curious of the structure of it and what's the best use of it's to renew a contract at new terms or potentially the municipality take it over.
Yeah, I'm not totally sure we own it. So
Okay.
let us finish the research.
Okay,
and
that's
we can answer those questions
Yeah.
more.
I think I was
As
assuming
we
we
began
owned
further
it.
conversation, there was
Okay.
some question.
And we normally get reports on the solar array at the transfer station. I don't recall seeing
I
any.
emailed that out to you a couple weeks ago. It's the quarterly report. It kind of came just after your meeting, I think, so I think I sent it directly. There was nothing, it was the same.
Yeah, it's not very earth shattering.
Yeah, too bad.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Neil. So that brings us to public forum. Anyone would like to, Mary?
You mentioned, Mary Ledbetter again, the points of pride, talking about the Rotary and the flags. I'd like to say that Sarah Hoff and her merry band of flag wavers put all the veterans' flags out. And they did a great job, and Gail Kimball was following up on that to see if anything was missed. And I guess a few were, and I've been dealing with Sarah on that, and she's done a great job. So I think as much as the Rotary gets good recognition, Sarah and mostly kids did a great job.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us.
And there's an Eagle Scout project starting that is researching people who are buried in the cemeteries so that there's a better indication of where the veterans are and to make sure we're not missing it. So
That's
great.
Send them over to my street.
That's true. Oh, good point.
That little cemetery there, nobody even knows about it practically.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yes.
Catherine Mitchell again. Quick question on policy, not related to Class 6 roads. This is something I've pondered ever since it happened in Peterborough, but I would just like to be reassured that we have a strong policy. I'm confident that you've been protecting the money, but we have a new person coming in, and can you tell me what the policy is so that what happened in Peterborough
Sure.
doesn't happen here,
We
couldn't
do,
happen here?
we do very few ACHs, and the policy is to call and verify, never change somebody's account number based on.
Okay. And can one person transfer that
No.
amount of money?
No, it
Or
takes
is there some backup?
Yeah,
Okay,
all the ACHs require 2 people.
that's good to know.
So,
Thanks.
and most of the time it's the treasurer that is the approver.
Okay.
Fair concern. Thank you, Neil.
But we do worry about that.
Yeah.
We also do have emails through our IT company. We have spam tracking
Mhm.
that actually sends things to staff, and
Test them.
they have responded well so far. But if they do not, there's follow-up videos and things like that. So we are trying to be proactive.
Anyone, we have one person online. I assume they're not going to comment. Bonnie, you said you wanted to. All right.
Bonnie Christie again. So I have a couple of things. One is related to the Hopkinton Webster Refuse Disposal Committee, and the other one is related to the Hopkinton Waste Reduction Committee. In terms of the Hopkinton Webster Refuse Disposal Committee, you all remember that we have this joint 3 Webster, 3 Hopkinton members that are actually have the responsibility and authority to manage and run the transfer station. The committee has been a little shaky over the last few years, and we just got it up and running and decided that we were going to meet on a monthly basis again because of some of the things that came up, like the septage lagoons. It's like, oh, how did we miss that? But where we are now, I talked to Ken about this earlier today, is all 3 members of the Webster, all 3 Webster members have resigned. And one was just a disagreement about, what the committee can and can't do. Another person had been on that committee for 15 years and felt like she had done her service. And I agree. And the third one is just feeling way overcommitted. And so we don't have a working committee now. And so what I was asking Ken is I'm assuming that means anything that we're working on needs to be bumped up to the select board. For example, with the septage lagoons, and I know that our committee wasn't going to be making any decisions anyway, but we were talking about it and in the loop. And I know that the Webster committee members felt that they didn't know anything about it, that when we found out about this issue, Webster, they felt like they were in the dark about it. So I don't know if the select board in Webster wants to be directly notified about all this stuff, or how that, what the process is when the committee isn't functioning. So there's that issue. And the other one is we had talked about putting up new signs to clarify the recycling because it's so confusing to everybody. And we were thinking about doing that when there's money in the CIP budget to rebuild the recycling shed. And as Neil indicated, it seems like we're going to have to go back to the drawing board on a lot of stuff because costs have changed so much. We're going to have to reconfigure everything. So I believe you recommended that we not wait until then to do new signs, that to go ahead and get some improvements going. So the question on that is, we were assuming that money for new signs, and it's not going to be a lot of money, would come out of the recycling revolving fund. And then the question becomes, is that something that Hopkinton can just do on its own, or is that recycling revolving fund something that Webster has some say into? I mean, can we just go ahead and order the signs and spend it?
Not without approval.
No, not us, not us, but I mean Hopkinton, when I say
Yes.
we. Okay. And Rich Houston was suggesting that that would be just considered a maintenance. It's not a change in the management of the transfer station, it's just a maintenance issue. So it's okay to go ahead and work on that? And then the next question is what to do about, you don't have to decide right now, but the committee is kind of on the skids now, so we need to figure out whether Dana can, and the select board and Webster is going to pull together 3 new members, or, you know, what. So,
It's a 6-member committee, is 3 a quorum?
I thought it had to be more than half. No?
I don't know. I'm asking out of ignorance.
Oh, I don't know.
Why you usually have 5
You
committees.
could look in the agreement and see what it says. Suggesting that we can just go ahead. You guys tell us what to do. I'm not gonna go from that one.
Neil, if you could explain, once the budget is in effect accepted by both select boards, then the operation of the transfer station falls to Hopkinton.
Correct. We're responsible for the operation.
And so at what point would the Webster Select Board become involved during the year, if at all?
Try through their town administrator to keep them updated on
Updated, sure, but decision
unusual
making.
things.
So for instance, what Bonnie is saying about signs, that's just simply up to us.
Correct. That's an operational,
Yeah.
that's not even a CIP item.
And
It's operation.
if that were to come out of the operating budget,
Not in the operating budget.
okay, that's the next thing I'm wondering. This recycling fund, isn't that part of what we include in the budget?
Yeah.
For revenues?
No, has nothing to do with the budget.
So
It's a special revenue fund.
how much money is in there?
About $17,000.
That sounds about right.
Learn something every day.
Can't have it. We're getting our signs.
So way back, the history of this is they had a portion of the revenue to the transfer station to go into the recycling revolving fund. Recycling revolving fund, yeah. it's a revolving fund. Which is why it isn't part of like town meeting. It's not a special revenue fund that we have to vote on. Actually, I think I have authority over this because Steve Cloud did, and the town administrator was the backup, which I don't think is good. I don't think we've ever changed it. The others we've changed to the board. I don't think the town administrator should have authority to expend from any fund. So it was set up with a certain percentage, and then too much money went in. And then they amended it at town meeting to change it to $1 a year. And then they eliminated the dollar, and that money's been there used for different things, especially when we went to the pay by bag. A lot of the things that were done at that time at the transfer station were paid out of that.
So this must have been done quite a number of years ago.
This was no money's gone in my time.
Okay, because it was new to me too.
Yeah,
Thank
it's
you.
not. It's just been sitting there. There is a purpose as voted by town meeting.
Okay, and the purpose of the committee Bonnie was talking about was really to provide guidance to the select boards.
That's, I think, the way it's written.
I guess on the first, one of the questions, as far as signs were going, I'd recommend or move that we.
I think that's an operational item. So I don't think the board has to take action.
Okay.
Yeah, you can just do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, I don't think you have the authority to spend out of the revolving, but I do.
Yeah.
Okay,
Which is very bizarre, but that's the way.
okay, I've been overruled. Okay,
Okay, so that's it on the Hopkinton Waste Refuse Disposal Committee. And the second issue comes from the Waste Reduction Committee. I don't think you were there at our last meeting, right? Yeah, okay. So we would like to ask the select board to approve a proclamation making July Hopkinton Plastic Pollution Reduction Month. The idea for this came, there's an international group called Plastic Free July. It started in Australia. It's a very small thing, and then it became a global effort, and it's to bring awareness to the issue of plastic pollution and plastic issues. And the idea is to have the month of July proclaimed Plastic Pollution Reduction Month. And so the city of Dover did a proclamation a couple years ago saying, making July Plastic Pollution Reduction Month. And it was approved by the city council, and it has a whole list of whereases and so on and so forth. It's a completely voluntary thing. It's making the case for why the town of Hopkinton would like to reduce plastic. And it's encouraging people to find ways in their own life and with the groups that they're involved in to do things specifically during the month of July, which hopefully will spill over into the rest of their life to bring about change on plastic. So I took and the committee voted at our last meeting to ask the select board to do this. So I took the Dover template and I customized it to Hopkinton, and I have copies of this.
I want to note for the Waste Reduction Committee that we don't use paper. You said electronic version on Friday, it would have been part of the packet.
If
I just
Bonnie
wanted-
had her
I
act
just wanted
together
to-
in time.
Yeah.
And the other thing Bonnie doesn't do very
I
well.
will say that Bonnie's meeting agenda usually comes out about 10 minutes before.
Oh, yeah. Don't air the dirty laundry. I'm also not very good at making sure that the two-sided copying works on my copiers, which frustrates me to no end, but you know. Yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to have something to give you to look at, and I'm not asking you to read through it and say anything tonight, but I wanted to give you something so you'd have a concrete idea of what we're talking about. But the concept, because we remember several years ago, we had the bags and we had the whole effort about awareness, and that our waste disposal is becoming more expensive every year. People are understanding now that there's microplastics everywhere. There's even microplastics being found in human fetal tissue, which is very distressing to me. It really adds to climate change, greenhouse gas emissions. The students at the school, all three schools, have been very active asking the district to get rid of the single-use plastics in the cafeterias and to cut back in other ways in the schools. So the kids are asking for it. The faith communities in Hopkinton have been looking at some of the environmental injustices that are related to plastic production. And the third thing that I care about a lot, the town of Hopkinton is doing a lot of good things that I would really like to recognize and like people to know. So my thought was this proclamation could be something that would be supported not just by the select board, but also the Chamber of Commerce, the Economic Development Committee, and the Waste Reduction Committee. And I was talking to Meredith Lee today because she is on a few of those things. And she just opened this beautiful new store, and we have Witching Hour Provisions, which sells all these reusable things and refills and stuff. And I said to Meredith, what if the chamber joined in with the select board on doing this proclamation and making July Plastic Reduction Month. And then I thought, well, okay, here's, the Everyday Cafe has been using these for a long time, completely compostable takeout containers. I think Lake House uses them too. And Dimitri's has just switched to this. Here's an example of Markland's. I use these all the time. These are these little bags. You put your loose tea in it and you steep your tea, and then you throw the whole thing in your compost. There's no plastic involved. Also, you go into witching hour and they have these giant vats of soaps, laundry detergent stuff. You can fill your own container. You don't have to buy a jug of detergent every time you go in. Whoops, this is a laundry detergent that they sell in there. It's just a sheet. You just throw this in your washing machine. It comes in a cardboard box. There's no plastic involved. There are all these things that Hopkinton businesses are doing, which I think is very cool. And this was the latest thing. I just bought this as a Christmas present because, when I see something good for my kids, I buy it while I see it. But so this is, sorry, I didn't bring the ingredients, but is a paper washable chip basket. And this is ceramic. This is a handmade wooden spoon. This is another washable paper thing for your salsa, same thing for guacamole. I mean, there's all this cool stuff that people are already doing in Hopkinton. And, as a way of celebrating that, what I would love to do in Susan Covert's email or Facebook, or somebody who's better at social media than me, have the month of July designated, and each week we highlight something. Like we do a whole picture thing about, what they have at this new, what is it called? Main Street Mercantile, I think. Just a very cool thing. And let's see. I'm not bringing, and in the library, this is another idea I got from Dover, but the library in Dover did these great bookmarks. It's on one side, it says help reduce plastic waste, and it has the signage. And on the other side, it says take the plastic pledge, and encourages people to do something during the month of July. That, and Donna Dunlop has wanted to do some programs on plastics and waste for a long time in the library. So I know that she'd be all over this. Anyway, it's kind of a fun activity. And all it takes from the select board is issuing the proclamation. And it's totally voluntary. Nobody's being blamed for doing anything bad or required to do anything they don't want to do. It's all kind of a good thing. And this new organization, the New Hampshire Network for Energy and Environment and Climate, which I'm on, has a media release about this and how a wave of change is hitting New Hampshire single-use plastic this July. There's a couple quotes from me in it. I started a whole thing on plastic for this group. And I'll just give you copies of this press release, because this is, hopefully we're not going to be the only town doing this. There should be quite a few towns doing this. And again, I apologize for all the paper and that it's not two-sided printing. But again, I am what I am. Anybody you can teach me, please come to my house.
It also feels like very
And bring ink.
thick paper too.
Yes, but it's recycled paper.
Oh, good, okay. Do you know of any other towns besides Dover that have done it?
I think Somersworth.
Okay.
And, we started this 10 towns, 10 actions toolkit because we weren't making any headway on legislation about plastic in New Hampshire. So we thought, well, let's go back to the grassroots and let's just work on a community level. And, we developed this toolkit because we had 10 towns where people were doing stuff, like Hopkinton has done stuff. And now we have 28 towns. We just launched it in February, but clearly a lot of people are interested in this. So this is our activity for this summer, as we're trying to get as many towns as possible to do a proclamation. And we're trying to build the movement from the ground up. Anyway, I realize I've taken up a lot of your time tonight, and I also realize that July is coming very soon. I don't know how long it takes to, consider and vote on a proclamation, but if you can do it by July, that's good. If you can't do it by July, it doesn't have to be July. Any month could be plastic production month.
Any questions for Bonnie?
I was just thinking that, where you do have a whereas about the students, whether getting the school district to also be a signatory or a supporter of this.
I would love to. Yeah. Yeah, I can, Norm Gupel has been the person working with us on that, so I'll ask him.
Was this proclamation language just something you pulled from Dover as an example, or was this created specifically by the committee?
I pretty much wrote that up
Okay.
based on stuff that we've done in Hopkinton and the things that we've talked about and the concerns on the committee level. I didn't have time to get the committee to, I had a couple of people review it and give me feedback on it. So the committee voted to ask the select board to do this proclamation, but the committee didn't write the statements. Yeah, and feel free if there are things that don't sit well with you, edit them out. If there are things that are missing, put them in, customize it in any way. I think the important thing is to do a proclamation and bring attention to the issue.
Okay, well, thank you. Thanks for your work on this, Bonnie.
Thanks, Bonnie.
I don't think I've ever been part of a proclamation in my time.
Yeah, I wondered if we'd done any proclamations before.
There have been some,
Okay.
largely written the way this one is.
Okay.
Usually the whereases are a little longer. But now therefores.
Would you like some more?
Therefore be it resolved.
When we do proclamations or when we've done them in the past, what's the process, vote, and then what happens to the actual language?
Depends, often it's read at a ceremony that's already taking place. So.
Mhm. Interesting.
So Bonnie can read it in the 4th of July parade.
That's right. Okay. That's it.
The problem is everybody on the waste committee has a place in Maine and they all go away for the summer and it's just me.
That's why they wanted it in July.
Oh, good. I mean, I like the concept. I think it's an important topic and I love the idea of raising awareness and making people aware of resources in town and things people can do to take little steps to reduce waste and plastic, single-use plastic. So I don't know. I'm not wedded to the language here, but I think conceptually I like the idea.
There'll be a version of it on our next agenda.
And if you have any comments, send them in advance. Have a draft. I'll largely use this. Could you send me the electronic version?
Sure. I was going to do it tonight, but I didn't know they had time to look at it, so I just put it right in front of them.
I like the idea as well. I think that the proclamation, it'd be nice to know what the plastic pledge is.
Oh, yeah.
It's on the back.
Yeah, but it's just not in the proclamation. I mean,
That's right. You
Yeah.
should develop an actual pledge that people can
It's a
choose
back.
something from. And
It's
There's
just
no
one page.
There's no pledge.
No, on the back of the bookmark.
no, it's
Yeah.
a bookmark.
Oh, okay.
yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
I'm suggesting that language be added to the proclamation.
That makes.
Yeah,
That's
so
a
that
great
people
idea.
understand what we're asking them to pledge to do.
Okay, yeah, makes sense.
All right, so we have another June meeting where we can discuss.
Two quick non-public C&A.
All right, so did anyone have anything for other? Don't think so. Okay. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Bonnie, for your presentation on plastic. And thank you for anyone who tuned in. We are going to go into non-public and then we will adjourn and not conduct any other business. If we take a vote to go into non-public, which I will move. Sorry, moving. I'll second. The roll call vote. I'm a yes, even
Yes.
Ken.
Yes.